Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into Brené Brown's incredible work on leadership, Dare to Lead. We're going to unpack what it really truly means to be a courageous leader, especially right now when, let's face it, we need them more than ever. So let's start right where it all matters, in the arena. This quote from Theodore Roosevelt, it's basically our guide for this entire explainer. It's such a powerful reminder that leadership isn't about looking perfect or never failing. Not at all. It's about having the pure guts to show up and get in there, even when you can't control the outcome. That, right there, is the soul of daring leadership.
Okay, so Brown's research really got started with this one huge question she asked leaders from all over the world. And that question was, what's getting in the way? What has to change for us to actually be successful in this totally complex, fast-moving world?
And you know, the answers that came back were just fascinating. It turns out it wasn't about leaders needing more technical skills or being smarter. Nope. The real struggle, the thing holding everyone back, was something much more, well, human. It all came down to these common behaviors and cultural problems that just stop people from bringing their whole selves to work. Leaders kept pointing to the same stuff over and over. We're dodging the hard conversations. We're pointing fingers instead of taking responsibility. We're losing that basic human connection, and our fear of getting it wrong is just paralyzing us. And look, these aren't just little problems. They are all symptoms of a much bigger issue, which is how we handle fear and discomfort.
So if the problem isn't that people lack courage, then what is it? Well, Brown's research points straight to this idea of our emotional armor. You know, it's that stuff we put on, those defenses we use when things start to feel tough or uncertain.
And here's what we mean by armor. It can be anything, really. Cynicism, perfectionism, or just totally shutting down. I mean, think about the last time you stayed quiet in a meeting because you were worried your idea wasn't quite perfect yet. Yeah, that's armor. It feels like it's keeping you safe, but it's actually the very thing that's getting in the way of real connection and brave leadership.
And this is just so crucial. Daring leadership is not about being fearless. The real game changer isn't whether you feel fear, because you will. It's all about how you respond to it. Do you let it push you to put on that armor, or do you look it in the eye and choose to be courageous anyway?
And this brings us to what I think is the most empowering part of all this research. Courage isn't some magic thing you're either born with or you're not. It's actually a set of 4 skills. Skills that can be taught, skills that can be practiced. It's literally a playbook for how to get braver. So how do we actually do it? Well, here they are, the 4 pillars of daring leadership. This is your toolkit for building that courage muscle. First, you've got rumbling with vulnerability. That's all about staying in it during tough conversations. Second, living into our values, knowing what matters to you and letting that be your guide. Third, braving trust, which is all about building real connection. And fourth, learning to rise. That's resilience. You know, getting back up after you fall. You get these down and you're well on your way.
But, and this is a big but, it all, and I mean all of it, starts with that first one. Rumbling with vulnerability is the absolute foundation. If you aren't willing to get uncomfortable, to lean into uncertainty, well, the other 3 skills are pretty much impossible. Just remember this, your courage can never, ever be bigger than your capacity for vulnerability.
So how in the world do we build this foundational skill? We've got to start by taking a sledgehammer to the biggest myth holding us back. And it's a myth so common, it's probably the most popular piece of armor we all own.
The myth, of course, is that vulnerability is weakness. But the truth, and this is backed by 20 years of research, is the complete opposite. Vulnerability is the raw courage of just showing up when you have zero control over what happens next. It's risk, it's uncertainty, it's emotional exposure. And let me tell you, that takes incredible strength.
Now get this. Brain actually posed this exact question to a room packed with Special Forces soldiers. I mean, people whose job description is basically courage. And after this long, dead silence, one of them stands up and just says, "No, ma'am, I can't think of a single act of courage that doesn't require managing massive vulnerability." Wow, that one moment just completely shatters that whole weakness myth, doesn't it? So, okay, how do we actually start practicing this? We begin by understanding that you just can't talk about vulnerability without also talking about trust. In fact, this is how we start working on that 3rd skill, braving trust. We have this idea that we need to trust someone 100% before we can be vulnerable. But the research shows it's a total paradox. They're actually built together, little by little, moment by moment. And that leads us to this really simple but honestly pretty profound metaphor that comes from a story about Brené's daughter, Ellen. The idea is to think of trust not as some huge monumental thing, but as a simple marble jar that you have with every single person in your life.
See, trust isn't built in one giant gesture. It's built one tiny marble at a time, in the smallest of moments. It's remembering someone's name. It's asking about their kids. It's offering help when you can see they're struggling. It's these tiny, consistent acts of caring that fill up that marble jar and build the foundation for a real, trusting connection.
And every single one of those marbles, every one of those small moments where you're building trust requires you to do something that feels, well, a little risky. It requires you to be vulnerable. And that brings us right back to the central idea of this whole thing. You cannot get to courage without walking straight through discomfort. There are no shortcuts. You have to learn to stay in it.
So what this research really leaves us with is this one big question. We all have an arena. It could be at work, it could be at home, in our communities. The choice isn't whether or not you're going to face uncertainty and risk. That's a given. The real choice is, how are you going to show up? Are you going to stay in the cheap seats and criticize, or are you going to dare to step into that arena and lead?